below.
So tell me, why'd you do it?
Do what?
Where'd you put the bodies?
The bodies? What are you even talking about?
Explain yourself.
Well, it is all about the little things, isn't it?
Let's explore the evidence.
Dude, you're literally accusing me of something I didn't do.
All the evidence points that way.
What do you mean? What evidence do you have? You have no bodies. You have, literally no motive. You have...
You're creepy,
Nothing.
okay? So, they've convicted people for less. See how creepy he is? We can convict on that. Just the creepy factor alone. Exactly. See? Creepy factor alone.
But what? But let me be real here. What are you gonna to stop me from just walking out? What are you gonna do? What do you got?
As the movie proved, there is nothing they can do.
Good.
Without the evidence,
Good.
there's nothing you can do.
Good. So
But I can
whip
whip you with the gun. I can whip with the gun, get you a little scared, and say, you really want to go until you tell me the truth? What you did and why you did it? I'll scare a confession out of you.
You made it the wrong confession.
Anyhow, welcome guys.
Welcome, guys, to The Little Things, a brand new movie review. Guys, we have been waiting to talk about this movie because this one, I brought you this movie. I said, Nick, here's this film. It looks really cool with Denzel and Rami Malek and everything. And you... Once you saw the trailer, you're like, wow, okay, this looks
Well, as
interesting.
soon as you told me Denzel, I said, okay, anything Denzel touches turns to gold. So I saw the coming attractions, and then my dad saw the coming attractions, and remember, my dad said, I want to see that movie too. And my dad even said, if this was in the movie theaters, you and me would be going to see this movie. So, little tidbit, after we saw this movie, 2 days later, me and my dad go get HBO Max streaming on my TV at my dad's house to watch this movie. And I know 2 of other friends who did the same thing for this movie. So a lot of people really into this movie. Little spoiler, a lot of people saying this is the best psychological thriller that came out in 10 years. I don't know if I'd go that far, but it was an excellent, I will say, and I normally don't say this before a review, I really like this movie.
Here's my point of view on it is look, you have to have the right elements, at least to start off with. And when you have Denzel, you have obviously somebody who is just a powerhouse actor. Rami Malek, who of course is coming off of a big Oscar win for Bohemian Rhapsody. You have Jared Leto, which of course he's already a creep anyway, so it works perfectly. There's a lot of stuff. Now, I'm assuming this movie was originally obviously going to come to movie theaters, but because of COVID, that obviously was never going to happen. So, of course, it ended up being on HBO Max. But regardless, whether it came on streaming or in theaters, doesn't matter. It's here now. So, where would you like to start with the little things. So.
I'm going to start with, first of all, I think The Little Things is such a good title because it is the little things in this movie. And what I mean by that, I mean that even when they go back in the timeline, because this movie was made in the 1990s. So, and so the cars they drove, the type of appliance shop, the type of technology. And I really keyed into that because, somebody who saw this movie, like my dad, well, the technology, just to know they were using 1990s technology, this old non-laptop computers, their first computers. They weren't using sophisticated technology we have now. And I think that played a key role because I think the technology, the type of cars, there was a scene in the movie which, they rolled back a car. Now, in this day and age, you can't roll back cars. You can't roll back the speedometers. But that back then, they were able to say, okay, this is a rolled back car. We know this car has over so many miles on it. Just those things. And I think if you pay attention to little things like, that's what a good detective does. There was a beginning scene, one of the first murders, where he goes across the hall and he imagines himself being the murderer. That's what a detective has to do.
Yes.
Why was it staged this way? Why everything led up to that factor. And what this reminds me of, real life case was kind of like the O.J. Simpson case because they had all the little things.
Okay.
But they had, and this movie will show you, little things don't make a case. That's the problem. It doesn't make a strong enough case. You have to have, and that I think was the point of this movie. You can have all these little tiny things, what type of car he drove, this and that, where he stopped, where he worked, everything, but it doesn't lead you to necessarily a case.
What I think is very fascinating, and I love detective stories, detective noir stuff, is that, again, it's getting into the mind of a killer, into the head of a killer. And as you said, one of the things I love even more is that not saying that technology is a bad thing, because it's not a bad thing, but I feel like technology in movies has almost kind of ruined it in a lot of ways for these type of stories.
It does.
So when going back to the early 90s or late 80s, so to speak, when you do that, you strip away a lot of the easy convenience that is there now.
Well, if you have if you had modern technology, if this movie was made 2020, it wouldn't have been a movie. I can tell you because every single intersection has cameras, every single major spot, there's more lighting. Just technology has changed so much that sometimes it's harder to catch a killer, but this movie having the old technology, he knew it. And the creepiest thing about this is he used the old technology against them. Remember, he used the radio signal, so he knew they were in his house. You can't do that this day and age. They're not going to tell you a murder is going on, but he knew everything that was happening, so that's how he could track them just as much as they tracked him.
Yeah, but I think for me, is that, and I agree with you, when you say the little things, it really is very interesting because I had a coworker of mine, right, who saw the movie and said to me, "Oh, he's clearly the killer." And I had to stop him for a second, and I said, "Hold on a second." And I pointed out X, Y, and Z, and I said, "If he's the killer, then what about these?" Well, and
I think what was really interesting about this case, and people who watch, like you said, old crime flicks, there's something called a cold case. I don't know if you know what a cold case is.
I do, absolutely.
Yeah, a cold case is a case that they leave dead. They try to do the research. They have no leads, nothing, and they leave it alone. Suddenly what happens is a new case comes to light, and they try to tie these two cases together. And it shows you in this movie, which I love, you don't know if the two cases, and you still don't, the whole movie you don't know this, if it's one killer or two killers.
You don't. And I think it's very interesting because it's kind of interesting because like Denzel in the movie, right? Because you want to believe in Denzel. Why would you have no reason not to? And you hear Denzel say, "It's this guy." So you automatically think it's this guy.
But then you have Robbie Malek, where Denzel usually is the lead guy in a movie. There's a great part where Robbie Malek says, they don't fit, though. The type, I think he said something, the women don't fit. Like, if you look at it, the women that were killed in 1985 were all sophisticated, suburban, like, they were all, like, not rich, but they had money.
Yeah.
And then this killing was prostitutes. So that's where it's like, you don't suddenly switch from rich upper class or middle class to, and that's where the confusing part is.
But that's what I really love about this movie is that you can, and that's what I love about a lot of these movies, is that you can look one way, and which is great. You see that one way, and then suddenly, without you really noticing, there's a whole nother way of thinking that you don't really realize until later on in the movie where you have to backtrack.
I don't want to spoil it, even though a lot of people have probably seen the movie and whatever. But there's a key point in the movie which changed it for me, where I kind of said, okay, this might just be one killer. As I said, they make you believe, is it one killer? And there's a point with staging, which I think you know, with people who are criminal masterminds, people who are murderers, they do a lot of staging. And that's where Denzel told him, well, the staging for the murders that happened when I was investigating are the same exact staging. They are, the same type of marks, the same type. It's the staging is the same.
Yes.
And they also said, which is true, this guy had convenience, and why at the end of the movie, what happened, they said these murders just didn't happen in one area.
And I think what's really great is that this is a movie where I think you would agree with me that at the end of the day, whether you like the movie or not, you have to pay attention to it.
You do. And I will tell you, me and Seth, we watched this movie and we pressed pause, which I think is the convenience of being at home sometimes over in movie theaters. But we pressed pause quite a few times to kind of look and say, we missed that part. We missed that part. And even when I watched this movie a second time with my dad pressed pause several times and saying, okay, this is a movie you really have to pay attention to. Because if you miss any key element, the movie becomes very confusing. It comes to a point it's like, okay, that's what a good psychological thriller is supposed to do, though. Keep you on the edge of your seat, keep you to the point where is if you do miss a part, you're going to be lost. And I loved the ending of this movie. A lot of people did not. They said, left too many open-ended questions, but I said that's what a psychological thriller does, though. That's what a good movie does. My dad was funny. He goes, this movie needs a sequel.
They always conveniently want a sequel.
Yeah, but what I like, and not just acting, was the themes. I liked that it was the 90s. I liked that you had a guy that was creepy, that everything led up to him, but then, all the signs, everything, and then suddenly you realized it left you that key question, which most movies never do this for me. Is he guilty or not?
Well, almost like, am I guilty or not? But we know that I'm not guilty.
Well, we're still debating on that issue. I got other detectives working on the case.
So I gotta talk about the acting. Because as great as the plot is, it's the acting that really holds the glue together in a lot of ways.
See, I've always disagreed with you on that in every movie. Remember what I've said from the beginning. I said, does not matter who acts the movie, it's the plot. You can have terrific actors. This movie had both.
Okay, it did have both.
But I'm saying, I'm on a personal different view. I think always the plot holds the movie together.
Okay, so we're sometimes in agreement, sometimes disagreement, but you will agree that the acting had to be top-notch here, for sure.
I think with a psychological thriller, you need seasoned actors. I think with the psychological thriller, and they've tried doing this with certain movies, when you don't have seasoned acting, there is a difference.
There is a difference. Now, you have Denzel here. I mean, what can you say about the guy? I mean, he's amazing. He has presence for days on end. And also, I'm not going to lie, Denzel can be one intimidating motherfucker.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Seriously, he can be intimidating.
I was really shocked at Robbie Malek's performance, because I've seen him in a few things, But seeing this, I think he really went out of his comfort zone. I really do, and I said, that's what I liked about it.
What's interesting with Rami Malek, right? I mean, I loved him in Bohemian Rhapsody, Mr. Robot, of course. You know, he's going to be in the upcoming Bond film as well. So he's a good style actor. But here's the thing with Denzel and younger actors, right? It's very interesting because he swallows up younger actors. And what I mean by that is if you look at movies like Two Guns or Safe House with Ryan Reynolds or Unstoppable with Chris Pine, you look at those actors, right? Big Hollywood younger A-list actors, and Denzel is running circles around them.
Well, absolutely, but it's not just Denzel who does that. Tommy Lee Jones does that too. Harrison Ford. These actors who are seasoned, and that's I use that word seasoned.
Yes.
They had to train with some of the toughest directors, toughest. They have a different way of acting. And that's why they run circles around these young kids.
But the interesting thing is, so like I see these actors that they almost are like, okay, I'm the lead younger hip guy, and Denzel is the older guy. Okay, I'm gonna come and I'm gonna be the guy. Denzel just plows through him, and I look at Rami Malek. Now, I'm gonna be honest here. I did like Rami Malek's performance. Is he as good as Denzel in the movie? No, I don't think he is.
No, but I think he's remembered. Because you know who we're not talking about, and we haven't talked about in 3 minutes, who is not remembered in this movie? Jared Leto.
I don't see. I'm gonna disagree with you on that. I think Jared Leto is very much.
Even though he was the killer, and he was the focus of the movie.
Yes.
What I remember this movie for acting wise,
Sure.
as I remember the chemistry between Malik and Washington. I remember their chemistry. And Jared Leto, I'm not saying he didn't have chemistry, I'm not saying he didn't do a good job, but I don't think he was as memorable as those two.
I think Jared Leto has the difficult task here of being the person who is the suspect. He has to be the creepy guy, but yet also, you know, you have to also maybe kind of like think maybe he didn't do it. So he's treading a line between trying to be maybe innocent, but yet seem guilty at the same time. It's a rough sort of terrain to go over.
I think it's hard. I think there's probably a very hard role, as you said, with Jared Leto, because when they probably gave him the script, they said, you have to act guilty, but at the same time, you have to act innocent. And that's that's hard for a killer to say, okay, I'm the killer, but I'm also not the killer.
Yes, but I do think he did a good role and a good job of being creepy. I mean, I hate to say this about the guy, but he's always kind of creepy in one way or
Not just
another.
that, he's also creepy in real life if you read the stories.
Yeah.
He's just all around creepy
He's
guy.
a creepy dude. But I mean, I think he did his job perfectly. But I think I do agree with you that you come away with more of an impression on a Denzel or a Rami than maybe you do with Jared, but that's not Jared's fault exactly.
No, and I think also Jared, the problem is, Jared had a lot of short lines. Remember with Denzel Washington, he does this, it's very common in these type of movies, he gives stories. And what I mean by that, there was a major point in this movie where this little old lady, and he tells a whole story about that old lady, which is probably hard for an actor to do, 4 or 5 lines just about this old lady, describing her, everything. And for an actor to be able to do that, just regurgitate that and do it in such a way that makes you never even see the woman in the movie, but it makes her feel like part of the movie.
I agree completely with you. And here's another thing which is very interesting because Denzel said this in an interview. There's a scene in the interrogation room where he's outside of the interrogation room, he's looking through the glass. And he's looking at 2 younger actors, Rami Malek and Jared Leto, and he's on the outside looking in. And he, as an actor, was thinking, oh my God, I'm no longer the young guy in the primary role scene. I'm the person taking the back seat. But even though he might have thought that, I didn't feel that in the movie.
Well, no, and the thing is, having a name recognition does play a role.
Yes.
Even people, my dad's generation, I would say about maybe 50 to 70-year-olds, they don't really look at directors. They don't look at the production company. Our young generation, we pay attention to who produced this movie, what's the production company, was it Warner Brothers, was it Fox, so forth, who's the director. The older generation, they still look for actors. When my dad picked this movie, the first question he said, who's Denzel's in it. I want to see it.
See it.
And then he says, "Who's Robbie Mandela?" And
Malik,
and I showed up, a little on my phone. I showed him bits and pieces. Okay, I like him. I've seen him in a few things. He didn't know who Jared Leto was, but that name recognition, and people, a lot of older people say, "Okay, this is a Denzel Washington movie."
Yes.
And even though it wasn't supposed to be, this movie was supposed to be more.
It was almost like an ensemble, I would say.
It was supposed to be an ensemble
Yeah.
of the three, but it became, just like most Denzel, it became a Denzel Washington movie.
Yes, because again, Denzel is just that powerhouse of an actor that's what you get. That's just instant. I mean,
Yeah.
look, they did a really, 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 really great, solid job here, and the interesting thing is that a lot of people see. I think a lot of people, as you have said, consider this one of the best
Well, I think what people consider the best is
crime movie. Or
crime, but they like that it was done in California because everything that's bad happening in California lately, a lot of stuff. But they like the theme of the movie, Los Angeles. That played a big role in the movie.
Yes.
I'm not gonna give that spoiler if you haven't seen the movie. But the name of the city plays a huge role because there's a lot of lines that refer to that role, and there's a whole theme that has to do why this is done in this city and the role the cops and detective play. And I thought this time of age where you have people who say don't support the cops or people who say, cops are overstepping their boundaries. This was really good because it showed what's happening in California, a city in California, Los Angeles, which is really trying to limit what police can do. And this showed in this movie, sometimes police break the rules.
yes, there is crooked cops or people that cross the line, but I really do like these type of stories. Something back in the day, L.A. Confidential, which is really fantastic. Or I also actually the ones that people compare it to the most are Zodiac. People really love Zodiac, a
I saw Zodiac.
really great David Fincher film, and of course people really compare it to Seven as well. Now, is it as good as Seven and Zodiac? I don't think it is.
Personally, I don't think so.
I don't
if
think
you ask
so.
my opinion. Zodiac was one of those films where I still remember Zodiac, the Zodiac Killer.
Yeah,
I
great
still remember
movie.
Seven, and I think those were some of the finest, best psychological thrillers. I see this movie. If I had to rate it top 10, it probably would be in my maybe number 8 or 9.
What I will say about this movie, and what I think is fascinating when you look at it, is that it really what's really interesting about something like I would say a Seven. There is no doubt in this movie who the killer is, right? You know at the end who the killer is. You know what's going on. But I think it's far more interesting with a movie like Zodiac, which is why I think this movie fits more into the Zodiac category, which is that you literally have, oh, it could be this guy. Well, this guy wrote in this penmanship, and he did this and he did that, and I think there's a certain great sort of conspiracy theory-esque take that you can put into Zodiac, which you can also put into here too, because there's moments in this movie where you have certain evidence, right? Oh, the car, or that, or you also have the girl that says, well, wait a minute, the guy didn't have a beard and he had shorter hair, and it's these little things where like, well, is she mixed up? Does she not know what she's talking about? Or
Does she have a traumatic episode where she forgot details? And there's also a point where and I will say this is a spoiler, he goes inside the guy's house and he's looking at the flyers, the newspapers.
Sure.
And people are wondering, well, is he just a crime buff, like a collector? Or is he saving those because of crimes he did? It leaves a lot of open-ended questions. That's why I said, I really like this. I really like that this was done in the 90s. I really like that they kept it forward. They didn't have a lot of fancy technology. There was one part in the movie where a geek says, kind of like, it could be me too, kind of like proving like, hey, it could very well be me. And it got the detective angry, but that's how technology was back then. They didn't have the sophistication. As I said, if this movie was made now, it wouldn't have been a movie. It would have been an easy opening and shut case.
Which is why it truly is important to focus on the little things.
Exactly.
Now, here's the big thing, okay? So, people's enjoyment of the movie is, yes, it's going to be based off of the acting and the plot and everything, but it really is going to be based off of what do you think is a satisfying conclusion to this movie, and do you think that you got the sufficient answers that you wanted?
I think the movie, you have to look at it, and I'm going to look at it a different way.
Okay.
Okay, and this is the way I look at it. We focus so much on the killer, but it shows you right at the beginning what happened. And we're not going to
No, we're not
what
gonna
happened to Denzel Washington, but what his personal struggle was. And he understood Robbie Malek was about to face the same personal struggle
That he had dealt with.
that they dealt personal struggle. And what he said is, I don't want this young detective. I want him to live his life. He has a family. He has children. I want to give him peace. So it became not just about the killer anymore. It became about, let me give this, it's more about just finding out who the killer is. It's about giving this detective a peace of mind.
See, my thought about it is this, right? Because we won't really say it exactly, but what happens to Jared Leto in this movie is completely, yes, it was leading to that in a lot of ways, but it was accidental.
Mm-hmm.
And basically, Denzel sees this and it mirrors something that happened to Denzel. And in a lot of ways, I think, this is where your enjoyment of the movie will either stop or it'll become more intriguing. And I remember when we saw this movie, you and I saw this movie, and after the movie, we had so many questions that we have for one another. And we said, well, if he has this, then does this mean that he didn't do it? And if he didn't do it, then...
We actually went to a detective who was reviewing the movie on evidence. Remember?
Yes.
It was a detective. The actual thing we went to, he wasn't doing a film review. He was doing this purely as a cop, like a cop review, how a cop would view this.
Yeah.
And he looked at all the evidence, and he left even more questions because he said, well, there's 15 things pointing to yes, and there's 15 things pointing to no. I said, well, that doesn't really answer any of our questions. So this is a movie that really, I'm going to tell you before I do a grade rating or anything, this movie, watch it if you love psychological thrillers. Don't watch it if you want all your answered questions. It's not going to leave you a lot of questions answered.
What I'm going to say to you is this, guys, honestly, is that if you got frustrated by the ending of Zodiac, if you felt like, well, we didn't get to know who the real killer was, and it could have been A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and who the hell knows. This one is not as, leaving you on that big question mark, but there is, like I said, I had a person at work who literally said to me, they said, I did not enjoy this movie because of the ending. Mm-hmm. I did not enjoy it. And they had pointed out all these different things, and then they were like, well, then they said that those ones maybe didn't even matter.
Well, that's how my mom was. When we got this movie, as I said, we specifically got HBO Max at my parents' house. And it was me, my sister, and my dad were watching it. My sister loves her SVU. She loves, the police shows, okay? And those shows always have an ending. They always leave you some type of ending. And Chrissy, she watched the whole movie. I didn't like it. My mom, she didn't like the ending. She said this left more questions. No, it doesn't need a sequel. She says movies like this don't need a sequel. But she didn't like it. My dad loved it. He loved it. He was there and he said, well, it does have an ending. I said, it's all up for interpretation.
Yeah.
So my dad loved this, but, I think he's on a different mindset than, say, my mom was. So this is like, if you're into those Law and Order shows like Chicago PD or SVU or any of those shows, it's not going to leave always an answer. It's like the episode of the SVU what we watch, and it's like you don't know, as you said, who's the actual killer.
Sure.
And this is a type of movie you don't know, was there one killer, was there two killers? The beginning of the movie, you look at the beginning, you look at the end, and you say, okay, there could have possibly been two killers. Or there's a point in this movie where the guy actually, and I'm not going to say this, really makes you even think right before the end. Remember what Jared Leto said?
Yes.
Which makes you think, like, basically what this movie is, and I've said this when I started watching this movie, this is a big cat and mouse game.
Yes.
And basically he's playing with the cops, and it's to see who has superior intelligence.
And the thing about it is that you know, you are on this journey with Denzel, as you are on the journey with any detective, main detective in the story, and you so want to believe what this guy believes because you want to catch a killer, you want to save the day, you want to right the wrongs. And then when you realize that righting the wrongs maybe takes a lot more wrongs than it does rights.
Well, there's a main point in
There's
this movie, which is a spoiler, and you kind of have to say this. There's a point in the movie where Denzel looks at Rami Malek, says, I'm not doing this for them, I'm doing this for me.
yes,
And that was a really triggering point for me in the movie, because a lot of detectives, they do it for the victims. Victim, he says, I'm doing this for me. Basically saying, I'm doing this so I can get peace of mind.
yes, and so I think it really is a thing of like you have to go in and you have to understand that you know, yes, you're playing the detective along with Denzel. It's almost like watching an Unsolved Mysteries episode or something. You're playing detective, and at the end of the day, your enjoyment is only based on your own conclusions. And if you think the conclusion didn't come out the way you thought it might, then you're not going to enjoy it. If you thought it came out the way you thought it was going always to be, then it's going to work out perfectly. But I think for me, I I came in not really knowing about the movie and I left very intrigued. And with that being said, uh, what is your final thoughts and grade rating on The Little Things, sir?
This movie, for being a psychological thriller, I give it. I thought the acting was superb.
Yes.
I thought the theme, whole Los Angeles theme going on, what that really meant to the movie, it played a big part.
Yeah.
I thought the technology that was 90s, I thought even sticking up to the cars and the strip clubs, and we didn't mention that much in the movie, but there was strip clubs in the movie. I think they kept everything the way a 90s movie should be filmed, and I really enjoyed that. And I'd have to say the only negative I'd have on this film, and the only negative I'd have, is I would have liked them to explain a little bit more about Jared Leto. Like, just little details. They said little things, and I understand those points, little things, but there were certain things I wish they would have just explained a tiny bit more.
But do you think that helped with the mystery angle?
And it did, and that's what I have to understand. I would have to say this movie I'm going to give a solid A. Not an A+, I very rarely do that, but I'm going to give this movie a solid A. Definitely, I would even say if you don't have HBO Max, there's a lot of good movies and TV shows coming to HBO Max, but this is definitely something to get HBO Max, at least get the 7-day trial. Definitely try to see this with friends, your house. It's definitely a movie that makes you think, makes you really intrigued. I really enjoyed this, so I'm going to give it an A.
I think for me, you know, I love this whole genre, and it's gone back to some really great movies in the past. The old black and white ones, you know, with Jimmy Cagney and everything like that. You know, the old school ones. I've loved those ones so much, and for me, this reminded me of the old school ones from the 80s and the 90s that I really, really enjoyed and really got into. And as you said, the acting is amazing. The performances are great here. The plot is really intriguing, and I think the clues are really fascinating. And even just looking at it from a detective point of view, just the clues alone just make you think for hours and hours and hours.
And the thing I like about this, I want to say, it's new and fresh. It's not regurgitated crap. You gotta say, a lot of the movies and even TV shows coming, it's just regurgitated shit over and over again. This is something new and fresh, and that's why I gave it an A, because it's new and fresh.
Yeah, I mean, I do think it takes off of other movies like Seven and like Zodiac. As I said, I do love the scenery with the LA scene, with the neon and everything. I love that stuff. Reminded me of like old school ones like like I said, LA Confidential. But it was really really amazing to me, and to me at the end of the day, I'm not gonna lie. I wanted Jared Leto to be the killer. Whether he is or not, that is up to every individual. But what I will say is this, man. I think the movie makes you think, and I don't know if there's a lot of movies out there nowadays that really make you think as hard as this one did. So for me, some of the acting at times, maybe compared to Denzel, were not always the strongest. Maybe sometimes the plot didn't always work out the way you wanted it to, and maybe some of the clues were more confusing than helpful. But that being said, I thought it was still a very very smart film, worth definitely your time checking out. And for me, it would definitely be A minus.
Oh wow!
It would be an A minus. Really, really well done, and Denzel is absolutely amazing. Definitely worth watching. If you are a crime lover, if you love these type of TV shows and these movies, this is a no-brainer. Definitely, definitely worth watching. Okay, this has been fun, but I'm gonna bounce, man. It's been good. I like the whole bag over your head. Hey, you got some evidence. I'm gonna shoot you. Bang bang. It's been real, but I gotta go. It's been good. But yeah.
No, I don't think so. You're not gonna.
Well, what are you talking about?
I have a gut instinct.
What do you mean gut instinct?
I've got instinct.
What do you mean gut instinct, dude?
When I say you're guilty, you're guilty. So you're coming with me. So you're guilty,
dude.
You're guilty.
What are you doing?
See, I'm law enforcement, so when I say you're guilty, you're guilty. You're coming with me.
Dude, come on, dude. No. Dude, I am...
When I say you're guilty, you're guilty. You know you did it. I know you did it. So just stop fighting it.
Dude, you have no evidence. You have nothing. Dude, you're literally on a hunch, and your hunch happens...
My hunches are always right. Alright, come on. We're doing this the easy way or the hard way?
What are you doing? Come on. What the hell is this, man?
Because we're digging your grave too.
Oh, no, you're not going to use it. No. No. No.
Seth, are you okay? Right, buddy? Guys, I don't think he's waking up. Got a lot of digging to do. Don't tell anybody it was me. Guys, I hope you enjoyed the review. If you did, give it a thumbs up. Tell us what you thought of little things. Tell us who you thought the killer is. Got my own thoughts, but I ain't telling. We'll be back. Well, we'll get back to you on that one. Guys, take care. I got a